Hello and welcome back, my cult of birds, swanlings, book readers. I'm trying to workshop a group name, so we'll come back to that. My name is Sean, and today we are covering one of the weirdest, but also one of the most fun little Grimdark books that I have read in a while. It really stands out. Went into this book knowing almost absolutely nothing, except that it had one of the more interesting magic systems, and that it gets fairly emotional the further into the series. But other than that, completely blind. But just to give you a little tiny bit of a spoiler, basically this book revolves around the idea that the more delusional you are, the more powerful you are in this world, which means that if Bert Kreischer lived in this world, he'd be unstoppable.
Legit the best shoulders.
I do. Hold on, I do. I have legit great shoulders. Like great fucking shoulders. Yeah.
No, you don't.
Joe, they're ripping through this shirt right now.
But a little bit of outline, I will give you some general spoiler-free thoughts, dive into a few points that I want to talk about this book specifically, and would I recommend this, yes or no. Spoiler, I liked it, but I do not think that this book is necessarily for everybody, so let's go ahead and dive into it. General spoiler-free thoughts. This is definitely a grimdark book. The world is very dark, very dirty, and the characters are all very unlikable, but they still have little bits of humanity in there that kind of keeps you going along until you get hit in the head by just how unlikable they are in a constant stream of like, maybe they'll change, maybe they'll better, and then it's just constantly just like, nope, this is not the safe world that you would think it is. And I won't spoil how this ends in this section, but something that was kind of really interesting, or a question that kept coming into my mind, was in this world with this magic system and it being as bleak and dreary as it is it even possible to have character development in this book? Now, I mentioned earlier that delusion was the source of power for a lot of these things, so a lot of people in this book are just absolutely insane and lying to themselves constantly. So the normal sort of arc where you go through a hero's journey, or just having a character that would learn from their mistakes or go through experiences and kind of go through an upward arc, or even a downward arc, was kind of had a wrench thrown into it completely just by the fact that everyone is insane and do not make rational choices.
On all levels except physical, I am a wolf.
But the magic system was something extremely unique. This is a concept that I can say that is pretty fresh and that I haven't seen before. You're just experiencing the world as you're traveling through everything, and just everyone wants basically the same outcome from anything. So it becomes a really fun just dash where everyone's just trying to compete against each other, and they're all insane. So just the choices that are made and the ways that this book kind of winds through its plot was very, very, very enjoyable. I had a absolute blast reading this, but it's grimdark. The world was fun and imaginative, even with the sort of bleakness that comes with the genre. I thought that it still was executed very well. The beginning, I would say, in order to really set the tone and the themes of it, that may have been hit just a little bit too hard, but that was just sort of the first, I'd say, like 3-4 chapters were kind of designed to make you just really understand just how messed up and bleak this world is. And there's a few scenes involving mirror attachments that just really showcase this, that you just are left feeling disgusted while it happens. But a big theme of Grimdark is sort of that bleakness, kind of showing disgust, showing a mirror to some of the worst sides of humanity. And with the magic system in this world set up, I think that Michael Fletcher is able to do that extremely well. Now, once you can get past like the first 3 or 4 chapters, it sort of lessens up in the tone and focus more on the plot, the magic system, and everything else that's happening. But once I got to that point, I would say that I was thoroughly enjoying it. You just have to get past the initial disgust as you realize, like, yep, this world sucks. I would not want to be here. But as we started to close towards the book, I found myself more and more interested as more and more philosophical questions came up, how more of the world building started to actually come alive, and you were just left with like question after question of like what would actually happen when these certain things happen. So, I mean, it was really intriguing to go through. I can't say that anything directly comes to mind of things that I've read like this before, but just going through it, it was definitely something that I think is going to sit in my brain for a while because it was extremely memorable. Now, getting into spoilers for this book. If you just want to know if you should read it or not, skip to my recommend section of this video. I'll mark it down below. But the short version of it is, if you like Grimdark, this is definitely worth a check out. But there are three main things that I really want to talk about for this book. The first off is just the general themes of Grimdark. Normally when you get into a Grimdark book, you're generally having mirrors showing the worst of humanity, and it can be used to elevate certain things or tropes or things to a very cool type of degree. Normally with like power fantasies or other fantasy types in the genre, you're watching a singular character sort of like grow and learn sort of lessons and get held through just sort of the darkest night and trying to figure out how to overcome that and find the inner strength. With Grimdark, instead, you have that kind of an opposite mirror where you just sort of see the brutal reality of what the world is, but then nested in just that overwhelming just sort of darkness and depression and just how so completely fucked up the world is. You can find little sparks of hope and just little kind of glimmers that, hey, you know, even though this is just a complete mad meat grinder of there, then generally there is a spark to sort of carry on and keep you want to keep going. And the main issue I know a lot of people have with Grimdark is that you get shown the meat grinder of the universe and it is a lot and people don't want to keep going. This book starts out with trying to make the characters as unlikable as possible. You just have a narcissist, arrogant, pompous swordsman in the person of Vishtig, or you have Bedecked, who is just going around just constantly spitting up just disgusting, vile things, just overall being a completely disgusting person who is just scarred and hideous beyond belief. And then you have Stalin, who I did not count how many times, but you will be repeatedly reminded of her terrible breath, her very yellow teeth, and just her complete disregard of life as she just stabs person after person after person.
You scared? Noticeably? I'll say. Now stand back, I gotta practice my stabbing. No, please, help, stop it, police!
And it's just so overwhelming at first that it becomes humorous after the first couple chapters, just because you really get hit with just the reality of what this world is. Now, I love that, but I have seen people react to similar Grimdark books like The Prince of Thorns, where I won't spoil it, but the opening scene for that book or the chapter has made a lot of people DNF, and because of just the sheer brutality and setting the tone, Grimdark isn't something that I necessarily will recommend to everybody because of that. This book I felt like was an amazing addition to the Grimdark universe, but when you start to hyper specialize into these type of genres, then it narrows down the audience who's going to enjoy it. But I'm hoping that Michael Fletcher with his world will continue on building what he has set for us, because I really enjoyed it, but right now it's too early to see if that's going to be the complete pinnacle of what I consider to be Grimdark. People, though, have told me that it is an amazing book, so I'm very excited to continue on with this and sort of see just how the world's going to unfold. The second point was the characters. I thought this was very interesting, and while I was reading through this, there was just a question constantly going through my mind, and that is, would it be possible to have character growth in a world where sanity is impossible, and the more powerful you are is the more delusional you are. Watching Vishtig, Stalin, and Deck sort of go through and start to enact their full plan and actually get exposed to a little glimmer of innocence in Morgan in a very dirty world, I thought he made a great catalyst. But throughout the book, every time I started to root for a character, something would happen, and then it would just be immediate, just like, Jesus, how can one character be so unlikable? One of my scenes that I think really resonated with that was Morgan and Vishtig were like teaming up, and they were going off to find like the best duelist in the town, so then he could prove that he was the best swordsman like alive. And when the swordsman declined his duel and kind of snuck out the back, and it's just him and Morgan waiting, Vishtig throws a tantrum and winds up just like curb stomping a kitten. And there was an entire book about how do you make a character likable, and it's like you have them save a cat. It's like called Save a Cat series. It's literally screenplay has been written with the concept that if you want to be likable, save a cat. Stomping on a cat, I would say, is the complete opposite of that. So even though I was starting to actually really enjoy Vishtig as a character, having him start to play his own delusion of trying to be a hero and lying to himself kind of gave me the fake it till you make it vibes. To throw a tantrum and then just spin that like that. Immediately hated him. And he was like probably one of the more palatable characters that I could deal with, because we've all met that person who is just like arrogant, grandiose, but entertaining when he does so. So for up until then, I was like, you definitely have your flaws, but I think you're all right. And then no. But just watching these characters sort of lie to themselves and sort of back up and try to think each one sort of using each other for certain things, watching those bonds start to get like built up. Like when Vishtig had Bedek save him, Bedek starting to return some of Shaylin's affections, only to have them all betray each other in the end and just start to be extremely shitty. I mean, at the very end of this book, you start to actually see character resolution. And when everyone actually dies and goes to the After Dark, then you start to see the real character growth. And just through death, they realized it was really the friends all along that mattered. But getting up until that point, it was just something that I hadn't seen before. I'm very curious what's going to happen with the next book. I had heard that it's going to be more of a touchy-feely, like everyone start to actually resolve their shit type of deal. But when you're in the After Death, or basically the underworld, I don't know what that looks like. And more to that point, watching what like Morgan became into, I have no idea what's going to happen to it, which is something that I very much enjoy when I cannot predict the plot, and I am intrigued just how everything's going to like collide and come together. Koenig's arc I thought was extremely interesting, because it basically took what should have been internal sort of strife or dialogue, and in this weird sort of delusional world turned it into just, you saw his inner demons or inner turmoil actually manifest as creatures that could all try to go and overthrow them. And that was something that I can say with confidence that I've never seen before. So it definitely points for originality. But watching him and his Doppler sort of fight to see who would be in control, and just the difference of like something that's an external feel versus like a self-hatred manifesting itself, and the strengths that would come with that, just watching his whole arc come through was probably one of the more interesting things that I found about this book, other than Morgan's arc. Watching him kind of battle to see who was actually going to control and become Koenig, seeing his reflections plotting in there and just seeing what they were trying to do, and then just how each of them like vied for control while he was trying to ascend into basically godhood, but while also doing this to try to make the world a better place. Something I did wish to be explored a bit more that hopefully comes in the next books was, you know, he came together to make his own religion to make the world a better place, or at least a more ordered place, less insane. So it would be cool to see what more of the world looks like just with that thing. The other question I had during all of this was just like, how does this world have an economy or even function when you just have like slavers and people that would just lie and give themselves power, turn into mirror people, just all the craziness that happens. Just I'd be really interested just to see what like a slice of life would look like in this universe. Morgan, however, takes the cake for just pure interest, because he was the beacon of innocence in this entire world. You had him sort of bred to be the best, cleanest god possible. I mean, one that would follow orders completely from Koenig and just be naive in a certain way. But watching someone who was like pretty pure and innocent go off into this very fucked up world and slowly learn to lie, slowly learn how to kill, and just eventually become beaten by the slavers and broken. Watching him ascend into godhood, and then seeing sort of the epilogue when he's like saying like, we're gonna wage a holy war against everything, and just seeing just how like brutalized and like mentally scarred he is, just it's very interesting. And throughout the whole book we kept talking about the Underdark and whether or not certain things would happen. So then to realize that like, yeah, people you kill serve, and then yes, you can ascend into godhood. I'm very curious about what's going to happen next. And lastly, the magic system. I thought this was kind of the selling point for the book, because in this book you really didn't have a lot of character arcs. Most of the characters were extremely unlikable, and it wasn't until the very end of the book that I think that they really started to showcase themselves and start to get a little bit of self-understanding and growth. But what really pushed me through this book was sort of the mystery of what was going to happen, and that sort of Tarantino-esque, just like all these different like plot threads going to meet in a convergence on like a singular character. That, and also just the magic system, because nothing's really explained and you experience it as you go through. So starting to see all these German words that I have a hard time pronouncing that have the different sort of attributes of whatever delusion they believe in, I thought was very interesting. That belief influences reality makes me think that really, if you believe anything strong enough, whether that be the magic system or just anything about reality, then you absolutely can make that happen. So I don't think that there is a just set amount of magic that's going to happen in this world. I truly believe that if you are crazy enough to think it up and you believe it strongly, then you got that power. Koenig, as an example, when you get at a certain power level and certain level of delusion, you start to have multiple types of delusions that start to manifest, and watching them all plot to kill you and replace you is a terrifying concept, but a very interesting concept, because you literally have yourself with your memories as a manifested sort of archetype of your personality, all doing battle to try to like kill you and replace you. It's just watching that happen. I was on the edge of my seat trying to figure out, is he going to figure it out? Is he going to get replaced? And then when he actually does get replaced, now it's like, well, what the hell's going to happen now? Mirror person's in charge. What does that actually mean? They've replaced him. Is he now going to have the same problem? Like, what's actually going to happen? Is it just going to be a cycle of just individual like facets of your broken personality trying to take control over themselves? It's a very interesting question. We didn't really get into the kleptics and what like Stalin's thing is, other than it being like thiefy and stealthy, but the whole I think I'm the greatest swordsman in the world, and I'm so confident in that I become the greatest swordsman in the world. So watching that magic system where you'd have the duelists sort of basically have a who's the most hype battle, I thought was very entertaining. I feel like that's a great concept of however bets you can like sell the crowd on who's going to win, and you just can do that. You physically become stronger, better, and faster at whatever you're doing. It's just such an original idea that I really, really like. The magic system, I think, is a huge selling point for this book, and just something that is very fresh and original, and just the applications of it were just something my mind immediately started spinning with, and something that I found to be very, very interesting. Now, all of that being said, would I recommend this book? This one, I think it's going to depend on the audience. Like I mentioned earlier, I have seen people pick up The Prince of Thorns and immediately put it down just by the sheer level of brutality and violence that happens in there. I've seen worse Grimdarks before, but if you know that you are not a fan of Grimdark, I wouldn't say this is the entry into that genre. I would instead probably recommend some Abercrombie, because while it does get bleak and very fucked up, it's more wrapped in humor and it eases you into it in a way that I don't think that this book does. But if you are a Grimdark fan and you haven't read this, then absolutely. I love Grimdark as a genre. I remember my life being in shambles when I was like in my like late teens, early 20s, being hungover and reading books where the world was like dark and twisted and full of pain, and having these tiny glimpses of like hope and stuff for me really fit what I was going through at the time. So I developed a big love for that. But not everyone goes through that, and not everyone likes Grimdark. So if you are someone who has picked up Grimdark before, and for whatever reason, maybe you got grossed out, maybe the violence was gratuitous, maybe it was just too bleak and dark, then I don't think that this is going to be the book that is going to bring you over to the Grimdark side. But if you do start to get into it, then this book, I think, is an excellent Grimdark novel, and for any fans of it, I would highly recommend it. You'll have to get past the unlikable characters at first, but if you push through to the end, I think it is rewarding in the payoff. But I think the magic system, the mystery, and sort of all the interweaving plots and just the general ideas that were being put in this book were extremely original and a lot of fun. So I would definitely say check it out, and even if you get halfway and start to think about DNFing it, just push through to the end and see what you think about it. Can't talk about the rest of the series, but I will be picking up the next book pretty soon. But all in all, this was one of the more interesting reads that I can remember doing. I think it's going to live in my head for a while, and that is something that I consider to be high praise, because I'm going to be thinking about this at random times for probably the next few months and trying to think of interesting ways that I can incorporate it into my own writing. But hopefully you guys enjoyed it. If you have read the further on to the series and think that it's great and to keep going, then comment down below. If you have other Grimdark recommendations, or if you think that this is a book that you should actually recommend to anybody, then we can talk about it down below as well. But as always, Appreciate it, guys. Stop by and take it easy.